Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today we are diving deep into a subject that challenges the very foundation of how we view childhood learning and the architecture of the human brain. In the high-stakes world of modern education, where standardized testing often dictates the rhythm of childhood and rote memorization is frequently mistaken for learning, a quiet revolution has been simmering for over a century. It takes place in classrooms that look less like instructional factories and more like living rooms or laboratories. These are spaces where children move freely, choose their own work, and engage in deep, uninterrupted concentration. We are talking, of course, about the Montessori method. For decades, this educational philosophy was often dismissed by traditionalists as just play, or a niche privilege for the elite. But today, as we stand in 2026, the narrative has shifted dramatically. A tidal wave of longitudinal research, neuroscientific imaging, and economic analysis has confirmed what Maria Montessori hypothesized back in 1907. That hypothesis was that this specific pedagogical approach does not merely teach children what to learn, but fundamentally alters how their brains develop, creating cognitive architectures that pay dividends well into adulthood. From the so-called Montessori mafia of Silicon Valley innovators to the measurable closing of the achievement gap in low-income public districts, the evidence is no longer anecdotal. It is empirical. In this episode, we are going to delve into the long-term cognitive outcomes of Montessori education, dissecting the mechanisms of executive function, the neuroscience of embodied cognition, and the profound implications for a 21st century workforce that demands adaptability over obedience. To understand the long-term outcomes, one must first understand the machine that generates them. The popular image of a Montessori classroom is one of wooden toys and hushed voices. The reality is a sophisticated environment designed to leverage the brain's natural plasticity. Dr. Maria Montessori, a physician and scientist, famously declared that the hand is the instrument of man's intelligence. Modern cognitive science calls this embodied cognition, which is the idea that our thinking is deeply rooted in our physical interactions with the world. Think about a traditional classroom. A child learns math by looking at abstract symbols on a whiteboard, like 1 + 1 = 2. Now contrast that with a Montessori classroom. A 4-year-old learns addition by physically joining a golden bead bar of 1 with another bar of 1. They feel the weight, the texture, and the union. The concept of 2 is not just a visual symbol. It is a sensory reality encoded in the motor cortex as well as the visual cortex. This multisensory encoding creates deep traces in the brain. When that child later encounters algebra in high school, the neural pathways for quantity manipulation are already paved and reinforced with myelin. They aren't just memorizing formulas. They possess an intuitive number sense that researchers have correlated with higher achievement in advanced mathematics. If there is a single secret sauce to the Montessori long-term advantage, it is executive function, or EF. EF is the brain's air traffic control system. It is a set of mental skills that include working memory, flexible thinking, and self-control. It is the ability to plan a task, ignore distractions, and persist through difficulty. In a conventional setting, the teacher provides the executive function. The teacher decides what to do, when to do it, and when to stop. The child's EF muscles remain passive. In a Montessori environment, the burden of executive function is shifted to the child. A 3-year-old enters the room and must ask themselves, what will I work on? Where will I get the mat? Who will I work with? How long will I stick with this difficult puzzle? Every single day, for hours at a time, the child is performing reps of executive function training. A 2006 study published in the journal Science by Dr. Angeline Lillard compared 5-year-old Montessori students to lottery losers who attended traditional schools. The Montessori students showed significantly higher executive function capabilities. They could adapt to changing rules faster, solve complex puzzles more efficiently, and regulate their impulses better. This is the cognitive foundation that predicts adult success more reliably than IQ. It is the ability to manage oneself in a chaotic world, a skill that, once encoded in early childhood, appears to be remarkably durable. Now, let's look at the evidence base. For years, critics argued that Montessori students did well simply because they came from wealthy, supportive families. This selection bias plagued early research. However, the last 2 decades have seen the emergence of gold standard studies, specifically randomized controlled trials, that eliminate these variables. The most compelling data comes from lottery studies. In these studies, researchers track families who applied to public Montessori magnet schools. Some got in, forming the treatment group, and some didn't, forming the control group. Since all families were motivated enough to apply, the background variables were neutralized. The results, solidified by the massive 2025 and 2026 National Randomized Controlled Trial published in PNAS, were unequivocal. By the end of kindergarten, public Montessori students had pulled ahead of their peers in reading, math, and social cognition. But what fascinates researchers most is the sleeper effect. In many educational interventions, gains fade out by third grade. Montessori gains often show a different trajectory. While some academic scores level out in middle elementary, the underlying cognitive advantages, specifically adaptability, problem-solving, and self-regulation, often re-emerge with force in adolescence and adulthood, when the scaffolding of the classroom is removed and independent thought is required. Perhaps the most socially significant finding is the impact on the achievement gap. In traditional education, the gap between low-income and high-income students typically widens as they age. High-income children have more resources at home to supplement their schooling. In high-fidelity Montessori programs, the data tells a different story. Low-income children in Montessori schools often show a steeper trajectory of improvement, effectively catching up to their wealthier peers by the end of the primary cycle. Why is this? The theory is that the Montessori environment provides the structure, order, and sensory richness that might be lacking in a chaotic home environment. It levels the playing field not by lowering the bar, but by providing individual scaffolds for every child to climb at their own maximum pace. The individualized instruction means a child who is behind isn't forced to move on with the class, leaving holes in their understanding. They stay with the material until they master it, building a solid foundation that supports rapid acceleration later. One of the most persistent anxieties for parents is the transition question. If my child spends their life choosing their own work and moving freely, how will they survive sitting at a desk in a traditional high school or university? The data indicates a phenomenon often called the wobble. When Montessori students first transfer to a traditional setting, often in 9th grade, they can experience a brief period of culture shock. They may be baffled by the inefficiency of lectures, frustrated by the lack of autonomy, or confused by arbitrary rules like asking for permission to use the restroom. However, studies tracking these students show that this wobble is typically short-lived, often lasting only a few months. Once they decipher the system, their executive function skills kick in. They treat the traditional school structure as just another material to be mastered. Research by Rathunde and Csikszentmihalyi, the father of flow theory, found that Montessori adolescents reported significantly higher engagement and flow in their academic work compared to traditional peers. They didn't just do the work to get the grade, they did it because they found it interesting. This intrinsic motivation becomes a superpower in high school and college. While traditional students often burn out or struggle when the external validation of gold stars is removed or the workload becomes unmanageable, Montessori alumni often step up. They are the students who form study groups without being asked, who approach professors to discuss topics off syllabus, and who know how to manage their time without a teacher hovering over them. They have internalized the locus of control. Moving on to adult outcomes, we have to talk about the Montessori Mafia. This phrase was coined to describe the disproportionate number of creative innovators who attended Montessori schools. We are talking about Larry Page and Sergey Brin of Google, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Will Wright of The Sims, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and Julia Child, among others. Is this just coincidence? Or is there a causal link between the method and the mindset of an innovator? It comes down to divergent thinking versus convergent thinking. Traditional education excels at convergent thinking, which is finding the single correct answer to a standard question. Innovation, however, requires divergent thinking, which is the ability to generate multiple novel solutions to an open-ended problem. Montessori education is structurally designed to foster divergent thinking. There are no test papers with one right answer. A child building a tower with a brown stair is experimenting with physics, balance, and aesthetics all at once. If the tower falls, it is not an F grade, it is data. A study using the Evaluation of Potential Creativity, or EPOC, compared Montessori and traditional students. The Montessori students scored significantly higher on divergent exploratory tasks. When given a stimulus, they produced more original drawings and more varied ideas. They were less afraid of being wrong and more interested in exploring the possible. In the adult workforce, this translates to the Google mindset, a comfort with ambiguity, a willingness to iterate, and a fundamental belief that problems are solvable if you approach them from enough angles. The long-term cognitive outcomes are not strictly academic. Social cognition, the ability to understand others' minds, is a critical cognitive skill. In a Montessori classroom, children are grouped in 3-year age spans. This is intentional. The third-year students, the leaders, reinforce their own knowledge by teaching the younger ones. This teaching to learn is one of the most effective ways to cement cognitive mastery, known as the protégé effect. Simultaneously, this dynamic builds profound social intelligence. Longitudinal surveys of Montessori adults often highlight superior conflict resolution skills. The peace table, a standard fixture in classrooms where children resolve disputes without adult intervention, trains the brain to approach conflict as a problem to be negotiated rather than a battle to be won. In the corporate boardroom, this ability to navigate complex social hierarchies and foster collaboration is arguably more valuable than raw technical skill. When we look at the alignment with the 21st century workforce, the World Economic Forum publishes a regular Future of Jobs report. The lists typically include complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, and emotional intelligence. It is striking how perfectly this list overlaps with the core curriculum of a century-old educational method. Complex problem solving is built through the use of self-correcting materials that require the child to figure out the error without teacher intervention. Critical thinking is fostered by the freedom to question and the emphasis on research over textbooks in the elementary years. Creativity is nurtured by the lack of standardized output requirements. People management is developed in the mixed-age environment, where older children manage the classroom community. We are moving from an industrial economy to a knowledge economy. In this context, the Montessori method is not quaint or retro. It is arguably the most futurist educational model available. However, there is a warning. It is crucial to note that not all Montessori is created equal. The name Montessori is not trademarked. Any daycare can buy a wooden puzzle and call itself a Montessori school. Research consistently shows that the benefits described above are strongly correlated with high-fidelity implementation. High fidelity means mixed age groups with full 3-year spans, uninterrupted work periods of 3-hour blocks, trained teachers with rigorous credentials, and the full suite of materials. Montessori-ish or Montessori-light programs often show no benefit over traditional schools, and in some cases, worse outcomes due to the confusion of mixed philosophies. For parents and policymakers, the lesson is clear: purity of method matters. You cannot replicate the cognitive outcomes of the system if you break the system's rules. Finally, let's touch on the neuroscience of normalization. Dr. Montessori used this term to describe a child who has found their focus. Modern neuroscience suggests this involves the regulation of the default mode network, or DMN, which is active when we are daydreaming or distracted. When a child engages in deep, manual work, they switch off the DMN and engage the task-positive network, or TPN. The ability to toggle efficiently between these networks is a hallmark of a healthy, high-performing brain. By practicing this deep concentration daily, Montessori children may be physically strengthening the neural switches that allow for flow states. In an age of fracturing attention spans and dopamine-addicted screens, the ability to deep dive into a task is perhaps the ultimate cognitive advantage. To conclude, the Montessori method was born in the slums of Rome in 1907, designed for children who had been written off by society. That it has become the preferred education of the tech elite is a paradox, but a telling one. The long-term cognitive outcomes of Montessori education are not magic. They are the biological result of a system that respects the laws of human development. By treating the child as an autonomous agent, by linking the hand to the brain, and by prioritizing executive function over rote memorization, Montessori builds a mind that is resilient, adaptable, and perpetually curious. As we navigate the uncertain waters of the mid-21st century, the ability to retrain oneself, to collaborate with others, and to think divergently will be the currency of survival. The data suggests that the children of the Children's House are already packing their bags with this currency, ready for a future they will not just inhabit, but help to design.